My name is Claire, and I'm going to tell a story that changed my life forever, so please subscribe to the channel to make me feel better. 7 years ago, I married Mark, a hardworking man with a good heart. In the beginning, we were happy in our small apartment in the north side of Chicago. Mark worked in an auto repair shop, and I sold Avon products to supplement our income. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was enough for us. Over time, however, routine set in. The days became predictable, the nights silent. We weren't unhappy, but something was missing. The passion that once consumed us had transformed into a weak ember, almost extinguished. It was on Mark's birthday that everything started to change. I organized a small party at home, with some friends and family. Among the guests was August, Mark's best friend since high school. I knew him by sight, but we had never talked much. When August arrived, something in the air changed. He had a magnetic presence, an easy smile, and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He greeted everyone enthusiastically, but when he got to me, I felt something different. His gaze lingered a little longer, his smile seemed warmer. During the party, I busied myself serving the guests and making sure everyone was comfortable. It was when I was in the kitchen, preparing a new tray of appetizers, that August appeared. "Claire, these appetizers are delicious," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You have magic hands." I felt my cheeks flush. "Thank you, August. It's a family recipe." He came closer, taking an appetizer from the tray. "You know, Claire, I've always admired women who can cook. It's an art, don't you think?" That simple compliment caught me off guard. How long had it been since someone noticed something I did? How long had it been since I felt seen? "It is," I replied, feeling a slight tremor in my voice. "I like cooking, it calms me." August smiled, his eyes fixed on mine. "I can imagine. You seem to be a woman full of hidden talents, Claire." Before I could respond, Mark appeared in the kitchen, breaking the moment. "Hey, guys. Everything okay in here?" August casually stepped away, as if nothing had happened. "Everything's great, my friend. Your wife is one hell of a cook." The rest of the night went on normally, but something had changed inside me. August's words echoed in my mind, awakening long-dormant sensations. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about August more times than I'd like to admit. I compared his confident demeanor with Mark's more reserved manner. I remembered the sparkle in his eyes when he spoke to me, something I hadn't seen in my husband's eyes for a long time. That's when I received the first message from August. A simple, "Hi, Claire. Hope everything's alright." Those appetizers are still on my mind. I laughed to myself as I read it, feeling a mix of excitement and guilt. I responded politely, thanking him for the compliment. But that message opened the door for others. Soon, we were talking daily. August asked me questions about my life, my dreams, things that no one had asked me in a long time. On a particularly frustrating afternoon, after trying to sell products all day without success, I received a message from August. "How about a coffee to cheer up the day?" I hesitated. I knew I was entering dangerous territory. But the prospect of escaping that suffocating routine, even if just for a few hours, was too tempting. "Okay," I replied, my heart racing. "Where should we meet?" We chose a discreet coffee shop, far from our neighborhood. When I arrived, August was already there, smiling as he saw me. He wore a dress shirt that accentuated his broad shoulders, so different from Mark's. "You look beautiful," he said, standing up to greet me. I felt my cheeks heat up. "Thank you, August." The conversation flowed easily. August made me laugh, made me think. We talked about books, movies, travel dreams. He told me about his work as a real estate agent, the incredible places he had visited. "And you, Claire?" he asked, his eyes fixed on mine. "What are your dreams?" I realized I hadn't thought about that in a long time. The routine had swallowed my dreams, leaving only daily survival. I don't know anymore, I confessed, feeling a sudden urge to cry. August covered my hand with his. The touch was warm, comforting. "It's never too late to dream again, Claire." I left that coffee shop feeling more alive than I had in years. The guilt was still there, a weight in the pit of my stomach, but it was overshadowed by the excitement of something new, forbidden. The meetings with August became more frequent. Coffees, quick lunches, sometimes just a walk in the park. Every time I saw him, I felt my heart race, my skin tingle with anticipation. At home, the routine with Mark continued the same. He would come home from work, have dinner in silence, watch TV, and go to sleep. Sometimes, I tried to start a conversation, talk about my day, but his responses were always short, uninterested. One night, lying next to Mark, who was already asleep, I picked up my cell phone. There was a message from August: "I can't stop thinking about you." My heart raced. I knew I was on the edge of a precipice, about to fall. But the fall seemed so tempting. "I can't either," I replied, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. The next day, August suggested a different meeting. "I know a discreet place where we can talk without interruptions," he wrote. I knew what that meant. It was the moment to decide whether I would cross the line or not. I spent the day in a whirlwind of emotions, weighing pros and cons, remembering the vows I made to Mark, but also the colorless life I now led. When I arrived at the address August gave me, my heart was about to jump out of my mouth. It was a discreet hotel, not far from downtown. August was waiting for me in the lobby, a nervous smile on his lips. "You came," he said, looking relieved. "I did," I replied, my voice trembling. We went up to the room in silence. As soon as the door closed, August pulled me into a passionate kiss. All the tension accumulated in the last few weeks exploded at that moment. We gave ourselves to each other with a passion I hadn't felt in years. Afterwards, lying in August's arms, reality began to set in. What had I done? How would I look at Mark now? "What are you thinking about?" August asked, stroking my hair. "About how my life has completely changed in a matter of weeks," I replied, honestly. August looked into my eyes. "You deserve to be happy, Claire. You deserve to live, not just exist." His words touched me deeply. It was true, I deserved to be happy. But at what cost? My story isn't over yet. Consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Back to the story. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt consumed me every time I looked at Mark, but at the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about August, about the passion we had shared. I started noticing details about Mark that I hadn't before. The way he chewed with his mouth open, how he left dirty clothes scattered around the room, how he never asked about my day. They were small things, but now they seemed like huge irritations. August, on the other hand, continued to send me affectionate messages, praising every little thing I did. He made me feel special, desired, alive. Our meetings became more frequent. We used elaborate excuses to see each other. To Mark, I said I was taking a makeup course to sell more products. To my family, I invented commitments with clients. Every time I met with August, I promised myself it would be the last time. But one look from him, one touch, and all my resolutions went out the window. It was on a Saturday afternoon that everything changed. Mark had gone out to play soccer with his friends, as he did every weekend. I took the opportunity to meet August at our usual hotel. We were lying in bed, catching our breath after another passionate encounter, when my cell phone rang. It was Mark. "Hi honey, everything okay?" I answered, trying to sound casual. "Claire, you need to come to the hospital now." Mark's voice sounded urgent. "My mom had a heart attack." I felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over me. Mark's mother, Mrs. Sullivan, had always been like a second mother to me. The guilt that was already eating me up increased 1,000-fold. "I'm coming right now," I replied, already getting up and starting to dress hurriedly. August looked at me, worried. "What happened?" I quickly explained the situation while finishing getting dressed. "I have to go, August. This can't continue." He tried to hug me, but I dodged. "Claire, don't make hasty decisions. We love each other, remember?" His words, which once warmed me, now sounded empty. Love? This isn't love, August. It's an escape. A fantasy. I left the room without looking back, leaving August calling my name. In the taxi on the way to the hospital, the tears finally came. I cried for Mrs. Sullivan, for Mark, for myself, and for the mess I had made of my life. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Mark in the waiting room, his face pale and his eyes red. Seeing me, he stood up and hugged me tightly. I felt his body tremble against mine and realized how much he needed me at that moment. "How is she?" I asked, my voice choked. "She's in the ICU," Mark replied, his voice breaking. "The doctors say the next 24 hours will be crucial." We spent the night at the hospital. Mark didn't leave my side for a minute, holding my hand as if it were his only lifeline in the world. With each doctor that passed, with each noise in the hallway, he squeezed my hand tighter. Observing Mark in that situation, I saw the man I married. The gentle, caring man who had always been by my side in difficult times. How could I have betrayed his trust like that? The hours dragged on. My cell phone occasionally vibrated with messages from August, but I ignored them. That parallel life I had created seemed so distant now, so meaningless. It wasn't until the next morning that we received news. The doctor called us to talk, his face serious. "Mrs. Sullivan is stable," he said, and I saw Mark let out a sigh of relief. But the heart attack caused significant damage to her heart. "She'll need constant care from now on." Mark nodded, determined. "We'll do whatever it takes, doctor." In the days that followed, we immersed ourselves in a new routine. Mark took leave from work to care for his mother, and I offered to help. We spent our days at the hospital, taking turns so that Mrs. Sullivan was never alone. Seeing Mark caring for his mother with such affection made me realize how much I still loved him. He was patient, attentive, always with a word of comfort even when he was exhausted. One night, as we sat in the hospital room, Mrs. Sullivan sleeping peacefully, Mark turned to me. "Claire," he said, his voice soft. "I don't know what I'd do without you. Thank you for being by my side." I felt my heart tighten. How could I have thought of leaving this man? How could I have been so selfish? "I'll always be here, Mark," I replied, holding his hand. And for the first time in weeks, it was a true promise. When Mrs. Sullivan was discharged, we decided she would stay with us for a while. Our small apartment became even smaller, but somehow, it felt more welcoming. August continued to send messages, but less frequently. I ignored them, focused on rebuilding my marriage and taking care of Mrs. Sullivan. It was one afternoon, while tidying up the bedroom, that I found an old box under the bed. Inside were old photos, cards, and mementos from the beginning of my relationship with Mark. I sat on the floor, the photos spread around me. There I was, much younger, smiling next to Mark on our first trip together. In another photo, we were painting the walls of this same apartment, our faces dirty with paint, but happy. Tears started to fall as I flipped through those memories. Where was that passionate couple? At what point did we let routine extinguish our flame? At that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't continue living in that lie. I needed to tell Mark the truth, face the consequences of my actions, and try to rebuild our relationship, if he forgave me. I spent the following days gathering courage. Every time I looked at Mark, caring for his mother with such dedication, I felt my heart tighten. How could I have betrayed someone so good? Finally, one night when Mrs. Sullivan was already asleep, I called Mark to talk in the living room. "Mark," I began, my voice trembling. "I need to tell you something." He looked at me, worried. "What is it, Claire? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. There were no right words for what I was going to say. I did something terrible, Mark. I cheated on you. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Mark's face go through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, pain, and finally, anger. "How? With whom?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. "With August," I replied, tears now freely running down my face. Mark abruptly stood up, walking back and forth across the room. "My best friend. You, how long has this been going on?" I told him everything. The meetings, the messages, the hotel. Each word seemed like a stab in Mark's chest, and consequently, in mine. When I finished, Mark was sitting on the couch, his face buried in his hands. "Why, Claire?" he asked, his voice choked. "What did I do wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong," I replied, cautiously approaching. "It was me. I felt forgotten, invisible. But that doesn't justify what I did. I'm sorry, Mark. More than I can express." Mark raised his face, his red eyes staring at me. "Do you want to be with him?" "No," I replied without hesitation. "I want to be with you, Mark. If you'll have me back. I want to rebuild our relationship, make it work." He was silent for a long time, seeming to weigh his options. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Claire. I need time to think." I nodded, completely understanding his position. "I understand. I'll sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow, if you want, I can go to my mom's house for a few days." Mark just nodded, getting up and going to the bedroom. I heard the door close and, finally, let all the weight of guilt and regret hit me. I cried silently on the couch, trying not to wake Mrs. Sullivan. The days that followed were difficult. I went to my mother's house, vaguely explaining that Mark and I were going through a crisis. She didn't ask for details, just hugged me and said she was there for whatever I needed. Mark and I spoke only when necessary, usually about Mrs. Sullivan's health condition. He was cold, distant, and I couldn't blame him. August continued to send messages, but I finally had the courage to block him. That chapter of my life was over. After 2 weeks, Mark called me asking to talk. My heart raced. Would this be the definitive end of our marriage? We met at a coffee shop near home. Mark looked tired, with deep circles under his eyes. "Claire," he began, his voice serious. "These weeks have been difficult. I thought a lot about us, about our marriage." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "What you did, it hurt me deeply. I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely forget. But..." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But I love you, Claire. And I believe our marriage is worth saving. If you really want this, I'm willing to try." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I want to, Mark. More than anything." He took my hand on the table. "It won't be easy. We'll need couples therapy. I'll need time to trust you again. But if we work together, I think we can overcome this. At that moment, I felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and determination. I knew the road would be long and difficult, but I was willing to do whatever it took to regain Mark's trust and rebuild our marriage. In the weeks and months that followed, we worked hard on our relationship. Couples therapy helped us identify the problems that had led us to that situation. We learned to communicate better, to express our needs and frustrations in a healthy way. Mark, in turn, completely cut off contact with August. It was painful for him to lose a friend of so many years, but he understood it was necessary for our recovery. Slowly, we began to rebuild our intimacy. Mark still had moments of insecurity, where jealousy and mistrust appeared. In these moments, I strived to be completely transparent, showing him that I was committed to our relationship. I also started investing more in myself. I went back to studying, taking a design course I had always wanted to do. Mark supported me in this decision, and seeing his pride when I showed him my first works made me realize how much we had evolved. A year after my confession, Mark surprised me with a romantic dinner at home. After dessert, he took my hand and said, "Claire, this year has been the hardest of my life. There were moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. But looking back, I see how much we've grown, how much our relationship has strengthened. I love you more today than on the day we got married." With tears in my eyes, I replied, "I love you too, Mark. Thank you for not giving up on us." That night, we made love as if it were the first time. There were no more shadows between us, only the certainty of a love that had survived the worst of storms and come out stronger. Today, looking back, I see my infidelity as the lowest point of my life, but also as the catalyst for the transformation of my marriage. Mark and I learned not to take each other for granted, to cultivate our relationship daily. There are still difficult days, moments when the past resurfaces like a ghost. But we face them together, with honesty and love. We've learned that a happy marriage isn't one without problems, but one where both are willing to work together to overcome them. My story is a constant reminder that our choices have consequences, but also that it's possible to start over, even after the worst mistakes. Love, when true and nurtured with care, can overcome even the deepest wounds. Today, Mark and I have a stronger and happier marriage than we've ever had. It's not perfect, no relationship is. But it's real, honest, and full of a love that survived the toughest test. If there's one lesson I've learned throughout this journey, it's that the grass on the other side only looks greener because we don't see the daily efforts to keep it that way. True love isn't in the moments of overwhelming passion, but in the daily decision to choose your partner, to work together, to grow together. My infidelity almost destroyed everything I loved most. But, paradoxically, it also gave us the opportunity to build something stronger, deeper, and more lasting. I don't recommend this path to anyone. The pain and suffering we cause to ourselves and others aren't worth it. But if you find yourself in a similar situation, know that there is hope. With love, commitment, and a lot of hard work, it's possible to rebuild trust and rekindle the flame of love. Today, when I look at Mark, I don't just see my husband. I see my best friend, my confidant, my life partner. I see the man who had the courage to forgive me when I didn't deserve it, who chose love over hurt. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I see a woman who made mistakes, but learned from them. A woman who almost lost everything, but found the strength to fight for what really matters. Our story isn't a fairy tale. It's a real story, with ups and downs, with mistakes and successes. But it's our story, and I'm grateful for every chapter of it, even the most painful ones. Because each experience has brought us here, to this moment when I can say, with all the certainty in my heart, I love my husband, and I am deeply loved by him. And in the end, isn't that what we're all looking for? A true love that persists even in the face of the greatest challenges. A love that accepts us with our imperfections, that challenges us to be better every day. That's the love that Mark and I built from the ashes of what we almost destroyed. And it's for this love that I wake up every day, grateful for the second chance that life gave us. If you're going through a similar situation, remember, forgiveness is possible. Reconstruction is possible. True love is possible. But it requires work, honesty, and commitment from both parties. Our journey continues, day after day. We don't know what the future holds for us, but we know we'll face it together, stronger and more united than ever. And so, I end my story. A story of mistake, regret, forgiveness, and above all, love. A love that survived the worst of storms and emerged stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to me. I hope my experience can bring some light to those who are going through difficult times in their relationships. Always remember, true love isn't perfect, but it's persistent. It overcomes obstacles, forgives mistakes, and grows through difficulties. And with that, I return to the arms of the man I chose to love, every day, for the rest of my life. Mark, my love, my safe harbor, my second chance.